Hi everyone, my name is Eleonora Magri, board certified behavior analyst, and today we're going to talk about addressing problem behaviors in school. Today's objective are going to be reviewing the ideas requirement for addressing problem behaviors. We're going to talk about manifestation determination. We're going to review behavioral support plan and functional behavioral assessments. We're going to review the components of the behavioral intervention plan, or BIP, and then look about how we're going to monitor the effectiveness of this behavior intervention plan. So what are the idea requirements to address problem behavior? It is to have a functional behavioral assessment and a behavior intervention plan for all students with disability that either are having problem behaviors that are interfering with his or her learning, or the learning of classmates and are part of developing an individualized education plan, or IEP, or the student is being removed from the school for more than 10 school days in the school year because of his or her behavior. And that's when a manifestation determination is conducted to determine if this behavior is a manifestation, is due because of the student disability. Regardless if that is due or not, and this includes also if the behavior involves any weapons, drugs, or serious injury, the student is going to need a functional behavioral assessment and a behavior intervention plan. And so what is a behavior intervention plan and a functional behavioral assessment? So behavior intervention plan is a specific guide of strategies and procedure that are going to describe how this educational setting is going to be changed so that we can decrease and prevent the student problem behavior that are impeding the student from his or her learning. And that could be, for example, the behavior of hitting others. And the plan is also going to detail how we're going to increase and teach appropriate behaviors or skill for that student. And let's say that could be asking for help. And so again, when is this behavior intervention plan developed? When the team determines that there is a problem behavior that is impacting the student learning or learning of his and his classmates, and then a functional behavioral assessment is then recommended. As you can see in this slide, there's a portion of the IEP called special factors at the bottom where indicates does the student behavior impede learning of self or of others, and there is a little space here to identify what is that problem behavior. And so here is when a functional behavioral assessment is important in addressing three main questions. It's number one, why is the problem behavior occurring? And so we want to identify the function of this maladaptive behavior. And it could be mainly for four reasons: either access to a tangible, for attention, for escaping a demand, or it could be for an internal sensory, or what we call automatic reinforcement. And we'll be reviewing more details in a little bit what each function are. The second question is, what specifically is triggering the behavior? And that could be an internal factor, it could be an external factor in the environment, and that includes the actual setting. Where is this behavior taking place? The people that are in the environment, the items, maybe specific instruction that are triggering specific problem behavior. There might be some internal pain or sensory stimuli specific to the student. And the question number three is, what happens after the problem behavior occurs? What's happening as a consequence that is going to increase or decrease the future frequency of that behavior? So what is that reaction or the outcome that the student obtains every single time after they're done a problem behavior? And so how do we develop a behavior intervention plan? Well, the functional behavioral assessment gives us all the information that we need to then set three important goals: prevent the problem behavior, teach the alternative appropriate behaviors, and then ensure that we are reinforcing those appropriate behaviors so it continues to happen in the future. And this plan needs to be specific, clear, and easy to read, in order to then be implemented accurately. And I'm going to guide you through the 7 main components of a behavior intervention plan. All right, let's review the first component, which is defining the target behavior. Again, this is a specific description of what the problem behavior looks like, so that anyone that is observing it can actually say that, yes, it did happen, and so it can be measured. It needs to include a frequency, how many times this behavior is happening, the duration, for how long, how intense it is, and also non-examples of that behavior. And so we don't want to just say Johnny is crying or Johnny is ripping paper. We want to include a description, something like this, where crying is crying with tears and a loud pitched voice for at least 5 seconds, and does not include when the student is, for example, in pain or when he's hurt. And the frequency is 5 to 10 times daily and in mild intensity. For ripping paper, we want to say that the child is ripping paper with hands by leaving a permanent product, and it does exclude any functional activity that require ripping paper. The frequency is 2 to 5 times weekly at a mild intensity. And this is the part in the behavioral plan where you're going to be seeing the problem behavior that is speeding learning and describing what it looks like. And in this example, we have physical aggression, property damage, verbal aggression and protest, tantrum, and a specific definition of what it looks like. So everybody in the room can again measure it and see if it did happen or not. Here it lists the frequency, for example, average of a few times per school year, average of 1 to 2 times per month, 1 to 10 times a week, average of 1 to 8 times per week, with the reference to each specific behavior. It tells you also the intensity, ranging from mild to serious, and also a duration for each of the described problem behavior above. Second component is the function. So this is really, again, what is the problem behavior occurring? What are the specific antecedents? And there's 4 functions. Could be access to a tangible. That means the child wants to access a toy, an activity, something to eat that they like. It could be to get somebody's attention, from mom's, teacher, maybe from dad, from peers. Maybe the child wants to escape a demand, so a specific instruction, maybe a request to do homework, complete a specific task. Or it can be a self-stimulatory or automatic reinforcement. And what that means is that there's nothing outside of that person that is contributing to the behavior. It's something internal, that it could be to remove a sensation of pain, or it could be to gain sensory stimulation. And I want to spend a little bit of time talking about when we're looking at changing problem behaviors, we want to be cautious in changing the self-stimulatory behavior and ensure that in fact they do impede learning and they're not just a characteristic of the child disability. And this is a section in the IEP where you will see the specific antecedent of the problem behavior and as well a check mark of the different functions of the behavior. Component number 3, antecedent strategy. So here we're going to list what environmental structures and support are needed to reduce that problem behavior. And again, these strategies are derived from applied behavior analysis, so strategies that are proven to be effective in modifying problem behavior. And here are just some examples of the most common ones, which are, for example, visuals. So we might have a schedule, some picture cards that illustrate break and help, maybe some first and then boards, maybe some reminders of set rules before, let's say, we sit down and do some schoolwork. Maybe a reward chart where if Johnny finishes math, then he can get access to his favorite activity. Another strategy is priming. So informing the student that, hey, in 5 minutes, we're going to start math. Could be an auditory or visual timer. There might be some environmental rearrangement or enrichment that we need to do. So for example, removing items in the room. Let's say that Johnny throws his paper or throws chairs. We want to make sure that the environment is strategically arranged so that there are less chances for that behavior to occur. Also, we know that sometimes problem behavior occur because the child is not very engaged or is maybe bored. And so we want to make sure that there are some enriching activities, and we're also taking care of any sensory stimulation or integration for the student. Let's say maybe a special chair, maybe some fidget toys, maybe some chewing toys, and so forth. And then most importantly, we also want to address motivation. And so directly relating a specific task with something that the child is looking forward to do, and he's only going to get access to that specific, let's say, candy or special activity if he engages in the set behavior, let's say, of doing his math homework. And here in the IEP, this is answer the question, what environmental structures and supports are needed to reduce the problem behavior? And there are a list of specific examples that the team needs to follow. So for example, visual supports to structure the schedule of activities each day, schedule, visual closure system. It could be a token economy reinforce a system to reward positive behaviors and positive specific feedback, provide verbal praise frequently. So just an example of antecedent strategies. Component number 4, replacement behaviors and teaching strategies. So what should the student do instead of engaging in the problem behavior? We want to identify those replacement behaviors, what we call the functionally equivalent replacement behavior, or FERB. So to ensure that we identify, again, what the student should do instead of the problem behavior. And so let's say we have screaming for avoidance or escape of a math homework. Well, we want to teach Johnny how to ask for a break and eventually to be able to tolerate doing the math homework. We also want to identify how we're going to teach Johnny to ask for a break. So what are those teaching strategies, maybe those materials or visuals, task analysis that he needs. And also we want to identify the reinforcement. So how are we going to reinforce that Johnny is asking for a break? Are we going to reinforce him every single time that he asks for one? Maybe yes, maybe at the beginning, every single time that he gives us a break card, or tell us, hey, I want a break, he's going to be granted one. Maybe later on, we want to fade that. And so every 2 times that he'd ask for a break, he's going to access it. And here in an IEP, this is what the section that it includes all of this in the functionally equivalent replacement behavior. So what the teams believe the student should do instead of the problem behavior. For example, communicate the needs for accessing something that he wants with I want X, can I have, I want to do it. Communicate the needs for escape or avoidance. No, thank you, I don't want to, can I have a break? And for the function of attention in this case also is I need help, come here please. We also have a box where we're going to list the teaching strategy necessary to teach again this replacement behavior. And so for example here are priming to prepare before transition, utilize formal or informal preference assessment to determine what will be the most motivating or reinforcing. And the last box, listing reinforcement procedure needed for 1, establishing, 2, maintaining, and 3, generalizing this replacement behavior. And so here specifically tells us use a continuous schedule of reinforcement to establish using the functional communication skills, and then generalizing it to staff, times of day, different activities, various phrases. Component number 5, consequence strategy. So should the problem behavior occur, what are we going to do? And so there is a specific section of the behavior intervention plan that highlights the behavior cycle. And so what happens from the precursor behavior to the de-escalation and the post-problem behavior, what does that look like? And also, what should the staff response be for each of those stages? We want to make sure also that the consequence strategies are relevant to the function of the behavior. And so if we have identified that Johnny's behavior of screaming is for the function of escape math, let's say, the consequence cannot be, let's take Johnny for a walk or let him go in another room, because that would be reinforcing that maladaptive behavior. The consequence should be something where maybe we'll say, instead of doing 5 math exercises, we're gonna just finish this last one. We're gonna then follow through. However, that comes into second place if there is a safety concern. So if the behavior is dangerous to the student, dangerous to others, involves property destruction, we want to make sure that we're concerned about safety first before even following through with any consequence strategies that are for modifying this problem behavior. And so very, very important to ensure that we have a safety plan in place. And this is the component of the IEP where you'll see this chart where we have in one column the student behavior in the different cycles. So the student early escalation behavior look like, for example, for the student raising her voice, screaming, task refusal, crying or whining. And the staff response is to use a calm voice when interacting with the student, remind her of the choices and reinforcers that are available, model appropriate language and functional communication phrases that are, again, meeting that function of the behavior, maybe using visual supports as needed. And this is very different than, for example, when the student behaviors during the escalation may include reducing voice volume, decreased physical activity, crying or whining, and staff response to promote this de-escalation is decreasing their voice volume as well, model phrases to express emotions, and so forth. The sixth component is goals. So how we're going to ensure that there is in fact a change in the problem behavior with implementing this behavioral intervention plan. So goals are really important and they need to be SMART goals. However, what does that stand for? For specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. And they should always have these components: a baseline, which is the levels of the problem behavior before the intervention, so then we can then compare it and see if progress was attained. We should have an ultimate goal and short-term goal and objective as needed, and definitely include who is responsible for taking data and monitoring this specific goal. For every problem behavior goal, so let's say decreasing the screaming to X level, there should also be a replacement behavior goal that meets the same function. So in the examples that we talked about, teaching Johnny how to request for break, ensure that Johnny is eventually tolerating completing X and Y, Z math exercises within his school day. And these are some examples how they look like in an IEP, where we have a section for the baseline. For example, we'll ask and receive a break, and once the break is over, she will then follow through with completing the task. The team will like for her to tolerate waiting for a break or complete a task before getting access to a break. Currently, student works well with new material or non-preferred task with a timer that indicates how long she needs to work for before getting access to her break. Also, she does better if the task is broken down into parts, and this strategy helps her to stay less frustrated when presented with longer, more difficult new tasks. So the baseline can be as lengthy and as concise as possible. However, it's important that it paints a good picture of what the behavior looked like before the intervention. The goal is by set date. When presented with a non-preferred task or activity, student will complete or attend to task for up to 25 minutes before receiving access to a break, with no more than one prompt, with 80% accuracy across 2 consecutive weeks, as measured by data collection and teacher staff observation. And then again, here is another section where it states persons responsible for monitoring this goal and taking data, special education teacher, and probably here school staff be a good good note to add. And here you also have your short-term objective, which are, again, smaller, more attainable goals before she is meeting the ultimate goal. Here we have another example for the social, emotional, functional communication piece. The goal is by set date, student will independently utilize appropriate functional communication to communicate her needs for escape access and attention with 80% accuracy as measured by data collection and teacher staff observation. And again, there is a space for people that are responsible, the short-term objective, and again, the baseline of what she's doing right now before intervention. And a third example here, areas of need for the social emotional. The baseline is that for teacher report, student is utilizing distress tolerance skills in 2 out of 5 opportunities. And her goal is that by date, the student will increase her use of distress tolerance skills. So for example, accepting a situation as is, asking for a timeout or self-soothe, expressing needs, thoughts and feelings to school staff, to promote positive peer and staff interaction in 4 out of 5 opportunities as measured by counselor and staff observation, data collection, and ongoing progress monitoring. And again, there is a space for listing people responsible for tracking the specific goal and what are the short-term objectives. And our last but not least component of a behavior intervention plan is the section for services. And these are accommodations that are needed for the student to prevent the maladaptive behavior. And so they relate very well to the antecedent strategies that we talked about before. And this could be materials, so visual stimuli, right? And environmental arrangements, maybe preferred seating, special seating. It includes related services, so maybe any direct behavioral services or consult that are needed in order to support the student and decrease the maladaptive behaviors. And it also includes training of personnel depending on, again, the components and how this behavioral intervention plan needs to be implemented. This is the section in the IEP where you will find this program accommodation with the start date and end date and the location in which this accommodation needs to be delivered. And in this example, we have preferential seating, frequent breaks, use of a timer to indicate how much longer of a task is left, short and precise direction, multimodal learning opportunities, use of manipulatives, minimize writing tasks, testing in a separate location. And this is another example of this service where it's consultation between the behavior intervention program staff and the school staff. And it tells you that it's delivered to the personnel with a start date, end date, and for the total of hours at the school site. So we might have a beautiful behavior intervention plan. We had a thorough functional behavioral assessment that helped us gather all the pieces for this plan. But in order to be effective and ensure that is in fact working in decreasing the problem behavior, we need to collect data. And so data collection is important to evaluate the student performance on the goals, right? Decreasing the problem behavior goals and increasing those replacement behavior. But we also need ongoing fidelity checks to evaluate how is the staff implementing this plan. And if the student is not making progress, then an IEP needs to be called so that we can either update the behavior intervention plan, revise the goal, maybe there is additional training that needs to be done for the staff. And in the other end, if the student is making progress, then maybe a behavior intervention plan is no longer needed. Maybe there are different behavior that have occurred that need to be addressed. Anyways, in any case, the behavioral intervention plan needs to be revised yearly at the yearly IEP, but also as needed if progress or no progress is observed. Thank you so much for watching. Again, my name is Eleonora Magri, board certified behavior analyst.
Hey, welcome to the Regulations on Discipline. So today we're going to be talking about two things: suspension and manifestation of the student's disability. Ready? Let's go. So I get this question a lot. Can my child with disabilities be suspended or expelled? The answer is yes. Any student that violates the student code of conduct at any time may be subject to suspension and or expulsion from the district. However, because they do have a disability, the IEP team and also the LEA has a responsibility. So let's review some of those responsibilities. So let's talk about the 10-day rule. School personnel under this section may remove a child with disabilities who violate a code of student conduct from his or her current placement to an appropriate interim alternative education setting, another setting, or suspended for not more than 10 consecutive school days, and for additional removals of not more than 10 consecutive school days in that same year. What is the 10-day rule? Well, basically anything that is beyond 10 days would be regarded as a change of placement. So let's go ahead and talk about what a manifestation determination is. When you hear those words, what it means is, did the student's action that got him into trouble, was it a direct relationship of the student's disability? Now, before a student with special needs is expelled from a school district, a meeting must be held with a parent to determine if the action that violated the student code of conduct was a manifestation of the student's disability. So when you're having a manifestation determination meeting, there's a lot that's going on, and two very important questions that must be asked and also answered. So let's go ahead and review that. Within 10 school days of any decision to change the placement of a child with a disability because of the violation of a code of student conduct, the LEA, the parent, and the other members of the IEP team must review all information in the student's file, including the IEP, any teacher's observation, and also any other information. So here are the two questions. If the conduct in question was caused by or had a direct and substantial relationship to the child's disability, that's a yes or no. Or if the conduct in question was a direct result of the LEA's failure to implement the student's IEP, including the behavior intervention plan. So let's say the conduct is determined to be a manifestation of the student's disability. Then what? Well, if the student did not have before a functional behavioral assessment, they need to conduct one. However, if the child did have a functional behavioral assessment along with a behavior intervention plan, they need to revisit both. Now, here's the most important thing. Does the child get to return to school of his last placement? The answer is yes, unless the parent and LEA agree to change the student's placement as part of the modifications of the behavioral intervention plan. So let's say it was not a manifestation of the child's disability. Then what? Well, then your child is subject to expulsion just like any other kid. The biggest difference is that special education services would still continue. It's just it would be at an alternative place, time, and setting. So let's talk about the zero tolerance rule here in California. There are 3 things that instantly will go up for suspension. So let's read this part together because it's really, really important to understand. So if a school personnel may remove a student to an interim alternative education setting for not more than 45 school days without regarding whether the behavior is determined to be a manifestation of the child's disability, if they bring a weapon, they bring drugs, or they do serious bodily injury to another person. That means somebody's about to go to the hospital. So can my child be suspended or expelled before or after school? Well, the answer is yes. California has a unique code of door-to-door policy, but let's go ahead and discuss underneath. A pupil may be suspended or expelled for acts that are part of the school-related activity or school attendance at any time. So what does that mean? That means if your child goes off to lunch and gets into a fight, can they be expelled or suspended or expelled? The answer is yes. During prom, during transportation of a football game. Next, let me give you an example, and this is a warning. The video that you're about to see could be disturbing to some.
I was walking down the steps of the bus, and he was behind me and pushed me.
11-year-old Jacob Chavez, a scratch on his left cheek from an after-school fight that happened just after he got off a school bus that brings him home every day to his mobile home park. Take a look. You can see how a student goes after him. He's hit and kicked while others gather around. Jacob's family saying he was held back. Jacob saying when he could get free, he threw some punches too. His mom calls it a case of bullying, a case that's been brewing for weeks, according to her. And now, because of this brawl,
I was really angry. I was really angry that nothing could be done.
that's the feeling she got from school officials, leaving her conflicted about whether to take her son back to school. You don't feel your son is safe?
No,
In the classroom or in the school bus?
no.
Anytime we have an incident with students, we want to make sure we get to the bottom, get information, and make sure students are safe.
Assistant Superintendent Pat Schlosser says all involved are being questioned by the school district, and police are questioning what happened too. They talked to the parents of the boy who allegedly hit and kicked Jacob on Tuesday. We tried unsuccessfully to talk to that family. Is there a lot of bullying here?
There's a fair amount here.
Amber Yaman and other parents who had heard about the fight said if it is a case of bullying, there's too much bullying at this elementary school. After picking up her brothers, 22-year-old Stephanie Rodriguez told us why she picks them up.
And they used to get bullied too, and then the school didn't do anything about it. We've come up here many times.
Every case, we investigate, we get to the bottom of it, and that's really the goal. Find out what caused the incident, what's at the root of it.
So that's what's happening now.
Because there's a team actually investigating right now. They're working with the families involved.
Involved in a brawl that was seen through the eyes of a security camera. Jacob's mom says she's going to work with some other parents to fight this bullying problem she says exists. Meanwhile, the district says its investigation is continuing. We're in Apple Valley. Hal Eisner, Fox 11 News.
So obviously that clip was really disturbing to see. What I wanted to show you is that was the child that pushed him down the stairs, was that child, did they have a special education? Was it a manifestation of that child's disability? As you can see, there's other issues and other layers that need to be addressed. However, if that child with disabilities actually was the one that started this and pushing down the stairs, then the district has an obligation to do a lot more investigation. For example, was it a manifestation of the child's disability? Did he not understand his environment and thought the little boy was a threat? Don't know. So if that ever happens to your child, my first suggestion, or to your client, my first suggestion is to make sure that you are there. Within this video, there's going to be a manifestation determination checklist just to make sure that they're covering all of the bases. Until next time.